Hey, everybody, and welcome to Lost in the Groove. Today we have a author, a writer of dark fantasy books. Series is the War Minister series. His name is J.V. Hilliard. So, without further ado, J.V., welcome to the podcast. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you very much for having me this morning. I appreciate it.
Of course, it's my pleasure. Well, tell me a little bit about yourself. Who is J.V. Hilliard? Who is the author of this book series?
Well, it's I come from a sordid past, right? I used to do government affairs. I was a defense and technology lobbyist up until COVID,
Okay.
and so my life was filled with realism prior to COVID. And when COVID happened, I had zero to do. Like DC was shut down. My clients and everything were kind of on the shelf, and my wife kind of instructed me, to use a very kind word. She said, why don't you, you're going to drive me nuts if you're not doing anything. So do something. And one of the things on my bucket list was writing a novel. And I've always been a fantasy adventure fan, even from my youth. I've been playing Dungeons. I still, to this day, play Dungeons and Dragons. And if you told the folks that I work with in DC that, I've been playing Dungeons and Dragons for 20 years, they'd laugh at you. And if I told them I was writing a book, they would think it would be some sort of historical fiction or even something like that. And instead, it's this fantasy adventure thing that meets dark fantasy and epic fantasy, and they would shake their heads. Exactly, there it is, right there. So, ultimately, I think that where it came from was the silver lining in the COVID downtime, and I wrote a book. And then when I found a publisher, she instructed me as well. She said, "Look, fantasy adventures are not a book; they are a series. And
Series
I'll
of
publish
books,
you, but
yeah.
I want to see a series out of it." So what was originally supposed to be a 3-book series is now a 4-book series, which will end around the holidays this year, and then beyond that, probably another series after that, based on the success of the first couple of books here.
Damn. Gee. So that's a really crazy shift, to go from working in a government office, to having that type of environment around you all the time to be like, well, I love D&D and I have a bucket list and I love fantasy. So I'm going to take this entire career change now. It's just I mean, you did that. What was like that going through that like shift in career?
You know, to be honest, it's great. I should have done it sooner. Nothing against what I did before. It's important, helping, protect the country with developing new technologies or helping tech companies that the government doesn't know exist, helping them find their way into the right halls and walls of Congress or halls and walls of the Pentagon. That kind of stuff is important, but it's really, it is stressful, and this, in a way, is not. Like, I get to wake up every day, go to a coffee shop, and write, and it's just a different, like, literally, I'll give you one example, and I say this sometimes, but not often to people. My first interview, when I was doing my first podcast, that's when the light went on for me. Because in my realm, when I would do an interview, whether it was a radio or TV show or a podcast where I was speaking in front of folks, I was always spending about 2 days getting prepared for it, based on the fact that I thought people were going to come after me for something. You're always in the political, you're steeped in this political world, and there's always going to be a counterpoint, and there's going to be a gotcha moment, and they're going to come after you. So I spent about 2 days doing the same thing. I was preparing for my first interview, and my host said, "So, what season of the year do you like to write in the most?" And at that, it was that light bulb that went off in my head, and I said to myself, "Holy cow! This guy's actually trying to help me. He wants my art to succeed, and he's helping me here. There's no gotcha moment. There's no bad stuff to look for." I mean, literally, it was. And at that moment, I was like, I realized that this is what I want to do with the rest of my life. Like, I literally like to entertain people. Writing books is escapism for me, and I could leave all the realism behind that I had been in for 20 years, and there's like zero stress in this. The only stress is meeting deadlines for the next novel and things like that. And that's not hard to do if that's your only goal, right? So, it's been fantastic. It has really been fantastic. The transition, I don't look back any day. I do not look back.
It's just really cool because I've had my experience with people that are in the D&D world and people that have found their passions and really took it to the next level. And it's really incredible what you're able to make. The thing is, I'll be honest, when you see a book like The Last Keeper, you might think to yourself, okay, this is probably going to be like every other fantasy that you probably find in a bookstore. But the thing that's interesting is that you're bringing into this is your experience. Like I told you this at the beginning we started this. When I'm reading this book, I'm like, this person watched a lot of 80s Disney movies that we totally forgot about, and cartoons of Lord of the Rings from the 70s that no one talks about. Like, there are things that you can hint on and you can feel on. And I don't know, I feel like it's something that's kind of hard to find, especially in the fantasy genre these days, because it's more mass market and how much merchandise you can push out more than just the story.
Yeah, I
That's just
think
my opinion.
no, and you're right on, you're hitting the nail on the head, right? So what I did was, I took my years of being not only a role player, but also a fan of the genre, and found things that I could twist and make my own. Like many of my monsters, my creatures, the races within, the characters within are new. They have to be. Like I can't borrow, you don't go into my realm reading about Middle Earth. You go in there reading about the realm of Warminster. It's its own place. It has its own pantheon of gods. It has its own monetary system. It has
Erud?
things that I've done, and that also harkens back to my time in DC. I saw the political machine and I saw a lot of the military machines as part of my day. Right. So to base the novels in a bit of realism, there are situations in those novels that are coming from real life, whether they're historical. Some of my battle scenes are reimagined battle scenes that have actually happened, that people may not even know about, but where as an amateur military historian, really is attractive to me, and then putting my spin on them to help my characters. And there are scenes you won't recognize because you hadn't seen them, like you said, in the mass marketed exact same thing over and over and over again. This is stuff that happened, and people can believe it because they can believe that it actually happened. And when you're building this fantastical world, where they have to ask questions of is the sky blue? Is there gravity? How do they get from place to place? You Grounding something in a sense of realism, something they can believe in, makes it easier to suspend that disbelief, and that helps. But I've also my love for the genre. You're picking up things that I've loved, like you mentioned off air about the Black Cauldron. You mentioned already about Lord of
Love the
the
Black
Rings, or
Cauldron.
my play of playing D&D. You know, eh, these characters. If you ever have played Dungeons and Dragons or any other role playing game, when you're reading through these characters' eyes, you're going to read through game tested material. This is stuff that's really happened, for me and all of my nerd friends. Over the
Well,
years we played together.
just because you have a dungeon master, the thing is you have to work as a team throughout different situations. Because I'll be honest, it really sucks when you have like that one guy that's just being an asshole, and just making everything difficult for everybody. We're like, bro, we could have been
Yeah.
out of here 20 minutes ago.
Yep, it is so true. And I'm a DM right now, and I've got a character in the group that's sort of like that every now and then. He does it for comic relief, but in truth, he's been doing it for 20 years since we were in high school. Every character has that same edge to them, and it throws curveballs at everybody else. And part of it is fun because as experienced players, it's okay that it doesn't go, it's not rote. It's not like something that all right, we've done this 100 different times. And his characters add a little bit of that. And there is some comic relief to it as well. I mean, you remember his characters for sure, because most of the time the players hate them. and as a DM, you hate them too because they're always taking you. They're
They're
zigging
such
instead of zagging,
pain in the
right?
neck. I
Yeah,
was
that's a
one
pain
of
in the
them actually. I was one
yeah.
of them. I was They made me a gay elf. I'm not kidding. And I was a healer, but I was there for comic relief, and I was the last thing you wanted when you wanted a surprise, because I would just walk into the room and be, "Hello, anyone here?"
See, and that's the kind of stuff he does that too. His character right now is a warlock, and she's chaotic neutral. If and so it's never about the goal of the party. It's always about her narcissistic self.
Oh my god.
And his last character, he had it was a it, again it was a sorceress, and she of course like she would conjure blankets for her to lay on instead of using spells in battle or to help people. She would do things that were for herself, and it would just make everybody mad, right? And but that's good stuff. It adds to the flavor. But like what I've done is I've tried to do is take some of the experiences we've had over the years, whether it was me as a player, some of the characters are based on some of my player characters, others are based on just adventures that we've had, and I've knitted them all together to create this quilt, and it's the realm of Warminster. And it some of it is complete. I mean, it comes from different places and different adventures, and some of it is brand spanking new. Like I just created it up as a good storyteller would, as a good dungeon master would. But then I've also taken aspects of things that I believe that people enjoy. So you'll see things in there as you get deeper into the novel that are typical, human struggles, right? The struggles, duty versus love, where you have this forbidden love, or is there, that Darth Vader moment where you have a chance at redemption and things like that, or this person isn't just evil; they weren't born evil. They made a bad decision, or something happened to them, and it went down a path. And do they come back to the light, or do they stay in the dark? That kind of stuff. And people, I think, gravitate to some of those tropes. So you'll see a lot of that hero's journey in there. You'll see some of those things that wrap around. So it's not, even though as a player you'll read it and be like, oh, this battle scene, I can see it happening because I think that way when I'm in the game. But also it's unique. Like I can't wait for you to get to the antlered man, or when you see what happens to Great Taurus, the villain in the novels, and some of the other kind of cryptids, as I
Well, I
refer to them, the
mean,
monsters.
I well, I got to the part where the Antler Man is in the vision.
Yep.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
Now, here's something that I wanted to touch on is the touch on like these characters. Like we've talked about black unicorns that have two horns. So if you're curious, a black unicorn is the opposite of what a white unicorn is. They're the opposite of light. They're formed from darkness.
Yep. And I put a twist on that too. So just keep reading.
Hmm.
It's not going to be what you think. I'll put it that way. But you're right. I mean, the concept behind the tetrine, which is the horses in which you refer, comes from the fact they come from the deep south in the realm, and there's sort of like this. There's a like a sort of a voodoo cult there named the Pilk, and they worship these creatures, but they're born from elven blood. They were the herd that was left behind by the ancient of the elves, this goddess named Alexis. And when she went to the Hall of the Ancients, which is my version of Olympus or Valhalla, when she left the terrestrial realm, she left her herd here, and they're still attuned to some of the elven characters. Now, these elves in my realm aren't the same as Tolkien elves. We've got Vermilion elves, we have Raven elves, we have Cascadian elves, we have
Right, because
Dale elves.
In Tolkien, elves are a pure version. They're closer to the one,
Right.
to the one creator. Whereas with yours, they're just a different species. They're
That's right.
species of elves.
That's exactly right. They have their own different individual like codes, and there's almost like a sort of a like an Indian caste to them. Where the Vermilion elves sit atop the rest, and then the rest of the elves are kind of beneath them by birth,
Like
and
High
that's a
Valyrian.
challenge. Pardon me.
Like High Valyrian.
That's right. And there is a challenge to that strata that happens with an elven princess who has to make a determination of whether or not she keeps it or if she breaks it because she realizes that this is sort of an old way of thinking, and it's time to move forward. And she falls in love with Sir Ritter of Vulcaneer, who is the opposite end of the spectrum. He's half human and half Raven Elf, which makes him Trollborn, and that's my version of a Muggle, right? And they're kind of looked down upon. So neither the Raven Elves recognize him nor do the humans, because he's sort of this
Half breed.
hybrid, yeah,
Yeah,
total half breed. And she falls in love with him because once she gets to know him, he is heroic. He is dutiful. He's everything that's good, and yet she's supposed to not even fraternize with him because that you're not supposed to touch. Don't
right.
talk to him, right? He's a trollborn, and so
I
there's
don't
some
know.
some like
It's
real cool social challenges in there too, which I think are fun to kind of
can
throw it
we
around and get people talking about.
can we like break the ice for a second and just come to the realization that elves are just cults? They are. They're cults. They hate humans. They're like, no, we want our own blood. We're purer than you. It's like, bro, you're in a deep cult that's going on for thousands of years.
That's a weird way of putting it, but there might be some truth to that, depending on how you look at it. In my realm, they're very interactive yet still reclusive. I like the idea of keeping the elvish trope where they keep to themselves. Um, they are their own nations when it comes to that, but there's also a sense that there are plenty of places like Ravenshire, which is a half human, half raven elf settlement within Ravenwood, um, where that branch of elf is very they're even though they're quirky, they're social, and they don't mind interacting and even living with humans, where others would, like the Dale elves from the Emmerdale, they would never come. They're going to be reclusive, live in the woods. The standard Tolkien elf or the standard D&D elf, where it's like, well, we're coming out because you need us, and that's the only reason we're here,
Mm-hmm.
kind of stuff. But
AKA
that's the
money
only
and
thing to
gold.
see.
Yeah.
Yeah, pardon?
AKA money and gold,
Yeah,
and precious things. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So you'll see those kind of things in there too. But I try to stay away. I've created my own races, right? So you're not going to see dwarves. You're not going to see halflings. You're going to see things that I think are likened to them. Like I have twergs that do the mining and live underground, but they're more animalistic. They've got tails. Um, lardles are my version of halfling, but they're more like halflings on steroids. These guys are crazy barbarian berserker halflings, which are kind of fun to have if you're going to use that term. And
Well, if you look at history, if you want to look at, for example, Slavic tribes throughout history, they were compared to Norwegian or Vikings. They were a lot smaller. They weren't as big as, for example, Vikings were. So in a way, you do have these interactions and histories of these smaller men. But oh my god, if you were around during the time of the Slavics, bro, they would rip you to pieces.
I use a lot of I did a lot of research on things. So there's some Norwegian stuff in there, which is very Tolkien-esque. I also have some Native American stuff in there, where the antlered
Ooh,
man comes from, the skin
yeah.
stealer comes from. So things I looked at, Eastern cultures and took some inspiration from them for some of these sort of creatures, like the spring heel, for example, or these, like after Spring Heel Jack, around the time of Jack the Ripper, which is totally different, but it's an entire race of these creatures that can spring into the air, and like these fighting halflings. It's a lot of fun. It's unique, but it stays within the confines and the rubric of fantasy, where if you can pick
Right.
it up and go like, I know what that is. This is a cool spin on it. But I know what that is, and I know where he's going with that. And so I think it makes it unique and fun for people. And that way they're not seeing the same thing just retreaded over and over and over again.
Well, if you take a series, because we've been talking about a lot, this is like Tolkien. Tolkien was a linguist, so he wrote languages and he created Elvish, and out of Elvish, he created Middle Earth. The thing is, a lot of these writers of fantasy literature that we know of in the past 100 years, they were taking from European culture a lot, immensely. The landscape, the seasons, battles in prior wars. So it was a very specific landscape that you were looking at. Like it was basically Europe. That's what Middle Earth is. It's basically Europe. But then if you have something like this, where you're taking in from Native American culture and um, Victorian era British times and cultures from around the world, and mixing in modern things as well, it kind of spots out because we're so used to that old idea and interpretation of what it was.
Yeah,
It's
and you'll
strange.
find a
Yeah.
well, yeah, but, look, I get it, right? You wanna stay true to the granddaddy of them all is Middle Earth, right? And I think
Right.
Martin put a stamp on it with Westeros, kinda creating his own stuff. My
Yes.
my problem there is what you had just described. It's not necessarily homogenous, but if I'm creating a realm, it's gotta be a realm, right? And so there's gonna be places that are more advanced than others, and others that are more primitive than others. There's gotta be different seasons, as you've mentioned, and even though, my first 4 books start off in sort of a very northern area. In the realm, it's a northwestern area of the realm where much of this happens. And there are 4 seasons. There are places in the realm that are tundras. There are places in the realm that like the Chilean Desolates that has these strange sort of like iron storms and stuff like that. It almost has a sci-fi spin to it. And to your point, I have a city that I call Abacus, which is a city of scholars and freethinkers. And you can go there and study anything you want. It's sort of like a free city. It's almost like if a university would become a city, right? Like that kind of sort of like free thought. People would get there and they don't care where you came from. They don't care what race you are. They don't care, what you're there to study. You're just there to study. And there are rules around that where the rules are this is peace. They even have a magical mace called Peacemaker that if they hold it high, it forces peace on everybody. So they don't have battles. No, there's still no. There's still an underbelly in all these big cities, but that's how I'm able to mix in advancement. And I'll take this to your point. Like if you look at like Jon Snow, for example, in Game of Thrones, that guy
Mm-hmm.
was the 999th guy on the. Well, I forget what his title, the High Watcher on the wall or whatever, and he's still using a sword and shield. 999 generations of the same guy using a sword. They hadn't advanced anywhere, right? Where Abacus allows me to that's my sort of James Bond Q character. That's the entire city. And they make these little itty bitty sci fi advancements so that I'm satisfying the 95% of the people that are reading my fantasy without throwing sci fi in their face. But like for me, someone that reads both sci fi and fantasy, it shows that, hey, you know what? There's a little advancement to this society. And so you'll see things. And most of the time, those advancements are used by the good guys to beat the bad guys. It gives them a little bit of an advantage. And sometimes the bad guys have these devices too, because Abacus doesn't care. They're totally neutral. And so they do have folks that'll make you crazy devices that you can use. And again, I've used my military history background to follow things like Greek fire and the way that they fought on naval vessels with quicklime and stuff like that to blind people. Like you don't find that in like Tolkien. You don't find that in Martin. Like and I just feel like adding that little bit of technology, I think helps push us forward. And again, it makes it feel more real, like the society is advancing, and there is a place you can go to learn these things, and there is this freedom of thought that's within Abacus that might not exist everywhere else in the realm, and I think that makes it different and makes it fun.
Yeah, it's kind of like it's like being stuck in Woodstock forever. You know, it's
Well,
like 1969, and you can't get out, bro. Like LSD keeps running through. Uh, but I
it's a fun
it.
place. If there was a Woodstock, it would have been outside of Abacus. I'll tell
Oh
you
my
that.
god, yeah. Can trust me, like the horses would be wild. Like you got like all the Tureens there, and there's like, whoa, their minds are just shaking. No, but like all serious, but like it just opens up just new questions and new possibilities. I mean, the thing is that we are advancing as a civilization. I mean, are we? I think we're at a point already where I think we just need to be able to expand. It's just kind of strange because if we get fed the same things over and over again, I'm not saying it's bad. It's great. It's just how much of the same thing do you want over and over again?
Yeah, and there's a point where even though it might be traditional, or there might be some ceremonial stuff to it, or there's a rite of passage, at the end of the day, it's always there's always going to be something new. Like things that were not okay when I was a kid are okay today, and there's new technologies, and people communicate differently. Like I have a, you know, you know, I had flip phones, right? And I didn't have a smartphone, and my head wasn't always buried in my text messages. And I have, interns that work for me, and it's like, look up, talk to me, can you do a call? Can I meet you somewhere? And they're like, well, I prefer to talk by text. And I've seen people, I'm not naming names because I don't know who they am, who have broken up with their significant others over text. I would have never done that, right? And there are things that just happen, and you just have to accept, hey, you know what? I'm no longer the next generation. I'm the older generation, and I've got to learn what the new guys are doing, and see how they're playing. And so change is good. It just oftentimes comes. It's difficult for some, and it takes time. And I think there are those that want it right away, and there are those that don't want it at all, and that's what kind of slows it up. And I think that's good. It's easier to like kind of piecemeal your way through it. But like you said, I mean, that's why I like what I'm writing. I think it's different than what's out there. It's not the same stuff, but it's familiar enough that it's safe to pick it up and then say, "Oh yeah, I like what he did there." Oh, this is interesting. I didn't expect it to go this way, and that's why I enjoy writing the way I do.
Have you had interaction with like fans of the series and their response towards the books?
Yeah, so there's two answers to that question, right? There are
Okay.
those that offer constructive criticism, and there are those that are fans. Like I think the most humbling thing for me is when I'm at a book signing, or I am at a convention, or I'm giving a speech somewhere, and someone comes up to me and they've drawn fan art, or they tell me, please don't kill this character. I love this character, or whatever it is, and they're invested in it, and they want to know when the next one's coming out. That's humbling because then you've impacted somebody, and that they're waiting for that next bit of entertainment that you're going to throw their way, and you hope that you satisfy them, even if it's not exactly what they want. You hope it's good enough for them to continue to read the next and the next and the next. And then there are those that just don't like it because they're challenging, and it's a little different than what maybe that cookie cutter marketplace allows for. And that's okay too, because if they've told me that they've read the first three and this is what they don't like about them, then that means they still read the first three, right? So it's like I've pulled them through, enough that they keep reading, and or they sought me out to tell me what they think. And I've got,
Right.
it's the old adage. My publisher says this a lot. She says, "Look, it doesn't matter what the review says. It's the fact that they took time enough to write you a review." And I've
Exactly.
had some reviews that are 5 stars and others that are 2 stars, and you're just like, "Well, what did you do there?" And you have to be you have to recognize that iron sharpens iron, and you have to have a thick enough skin that to see that constructive criticism and say, all right, well, that's how I can improve my writing for the next and the next and the next. And you do. You have to learn from that. But by the same token, sometimes people just don't like what you're writing, and it's not for everybody, and you just gotta kind of accept it, and just continue to write for those that like it, and hope there are more out there that'll figure it out and jump on board.
Well, the thing is, there's enough content out there that if somebody doesn't like something, they can always swipe right or swipe
That's
left.
right. Exactly. I think that's a
It's
really good way
funny.
of putting it.
It's funny you mentioned text messages because I'll tell you this right now. I remember when you used to get 1,000 characters. That's right, 1,000 characters you can use every month. Okay, you're like, oh, okay, 1,000 characters. That's not bad. Wait. Then they would give you only 3,000 minutes. Okay, that's not bad either. It was like $50. It was like $50. It was so expensive. It was horrible. You had to like watch every minute and watch every text. It really kind of, I guess, gives you a tool where you can kind of appreciate the time that you put into writing things because it was expensive.
Hmm. Yeah, and I've seen it where, you know, when text messages started to become a thing, I thought it was just going to be like an instant message, like a quick message. Now people live their lives on text, and I was
Paragraphs,
trained.
essays.
Oh, so it's like crazy, right? And like I prefer human interaction. I want to see. I need emotional intelligence to tell me how that person's reacting to something. I need to see them. I need to hear the intonation in their voice. I need to see their body movements to tell me what they're. But text messages could be so tone deaf. And you're just like, am I reading this right? Were they in a rush when they sent this to me? Or are they? If I'm reading this with a happy face, or am I reading this as them yelling at me? Like you never know, and it's just like you know, I just prefer the physical interaction because I think it tells its own story, and then where the person's coming from. And I think that some people hide behind their internet muscles, and the stuff that they send in text messages or emails would be stuff they would never say to you in person. But
Here's
because they had time to think about it, they could type it.
here's the thing though, right? Because you write books. So, this is text that you're reading and it sparks emotion and feeling, but text messages, which is also text, like, you're reading, does the exact opposite. It's very odd on how one form sparks emotion and creativity and thought, and the other version is just don't tone deaf.
Yeah, it
It's
depends
weird.
on the person who's sending it, right? It is the message that's leaving, and for someone who's conscientious and cares about what they're sending, they're never going to send something that reads terse, or maybe there's a code where if I just send someone the name that okay, that means what you just said to me is fine. Don't be offended when I just send you okay. That doesn't mean I'm blowing you off. But in a book, especially an epic fantasy book, you have words, there's depth, there's density, um there's opportunities for me to provide description that you want to read. You're volunteering to read it when you pick up my book and flip through it, or you scroll down in it, or you listen to it audio. You want that because I'm storytelling. When you're doing a text, it's usually something quick, like I'm in this parking lot, or pick me up here, or what are you doing tonight, like that kind of stuff. And so people don't, and not everybody's a good storyteller either, right? It comes down to it. And if you're not thinking about what you're sending, sometimes that could be read as tone deaf, or in a different kind of attitude than you would, and you would be more conscious of it if I was standing next to you. Like, you wouldn't say the same thing to me, but if you're sending it in a text, you could almost vent at that moment, and a lot of people do that and don't think about it.
Well, it's so hard in many ways to sit there and read, especially these long texts. Even more so is, for example, like reading books, is that we have so much time working and life gets in the way and this comes up and that. It it sometimes feels like an absolute struggle just to take the time to relax, which is kind of the experience of reading a book. It's kind of giving you your time to be in the author's world, and kind of imagine not working a 9 to 5, driving over an hour every single day each way.
That's right. Well, you hit on something that's a generational thing, right? Kids that are Gen Z and beyond, Gen Alpha, will never understand that there was a time when 9 to 5 meant 9 to 5, right? You had time off afterwards. You were unavailable. You didn't need to respond to a text within 30 seconds, or else you were ignoring me, kind of stuff. There's a demand now for instant gratification because of the devices that we have.
Right.
And there's a 24/7 attitude to that, that didn't always exist.
You
There were
just had a
times where I was like,
telephone.
right,
You had a
and if you didn't
landline.
wanna talk to someone, you just unplugged the phone, right?
Yeah.
And they couldn't reach you, or you had snail mail before that, where people would have to physically send you a letter, wait
Mhm.
3 days for you to receive it, you to get enough gumption to write back, they wait 3 days for you to get it, and it was a week between communications, and here, it's like the telephone opened that up, and now it's like if I get a text from someone and I don't respond within the hour, they're upset that I've somehow deprioritized them, and there's never any time off, right? And that's it's kind of weird because you see that in novels, right? And I say that only because there's a need for instant gratification in so many aspects of our lives. Like I'll use a perfect example of my own. I found myself doing this last year when Stranger Things came out. I binge watched it. I didn't want to wait every week for the next episode to come out and have to, DVR set so that I could see. I wanted to sit down over the 4th of July and pound it out, and I did. And that would have been unavailable to me in every stretch of the imagination 7 or 8 years ago, like literally not that long ago,
Well,
right? And now
because
the expectation is I need it now.
well,
Now it's because I'm
because
demanding it now.
well, because we had only cable, so here were your options. You had maybe Showtime or HBO if you wanted to watch a movie. If you had a DVR and you could record it, you did that. But if you didn't, you'd have to be there at 7 or you're not
That's
watching
right.
that movie.
Or you threw the old VHS tape in and
Yeah.
and taped it, not record it, you
No,
taped
you
it.
taped it. And it was horrible quality. You had like the lines used to go through, it
Yeah.
used to freeze. It was terrible.
Oh, just so bad in every way.
So
But
bad.
now that doesn't exist. Even in writing, like my books average around 500 pages, per, like 470 something pages. You just can't write them. They don't have like I can't rapid release them every month, right? And so you've seen people adjust to that, and what they're doing is Kindle Vella. Kindle pops up, and now you're literally digesting it one chapter at a time. And once a week, I can send you a new chapter, and those episodes are 800 to 1,500 words long on average. And it's so that folks that have a hard time sitting down reading a whole book can digest these things while they're on the subway, while they've got time when they're a soccer mom and they're watching their kids play. They
That's
can fire
genius.
through a couple of those episodes, right? And so you're getting books delivered to you in this serial format that wasn't available. It just wasn't available, or it was in like the old school magazines where they have Pulp Fiction and serials where you had to wait the next month to find out what happened, with the stories that went along. But it was like a month between. Now it's like a week between or 3 days between, and we want. And it's like that on demand stuff that you have that the internet has brought us, not just for that, but everything. You have all of this information at your fingertips. It's not like you have to go to a library and research it or you have to go to school and learn it. I can just download it on my phone in 30 seconds or less and put it in
Right.
my presentation. And now with AI, man, is that scary. That is going to blow up in a big way. You think the people are complaining about social media? Wait till that happens.
Yeah, I mean, my biggest fear for AI is with podcasting because it does minimize a lot of the tasks that I have to do for the podcast, but at the same time, I'm not willing to accept it. Um, it's just like it could write your own descriptions for you, covers, anything you want. It does. Um, I don't know though. It takes away from the originality. That's kind of what I love about a creative and fun book is just the originality in it. It's just hard for me to see that and experience that with artificial intelligence. Even though there have been books that have been written by AI that supposedly are really good. I don't know. It's just hard
Yeah.
to
Well, I agree. As someone that's a creative, it's hard for me to accept the fact that a machine, in this case, some AI device, is going out there and scraping all of these things together from already existing pieces of work and then putting them into a book or an art. Like I hear a lot about AI art and the fact that you can't use it in certain places because you've basically gone and stolen someone else's work and put it in yours. And even though it's a little bit, you might not recognize it. At a whole, there was 1,000 pieces of stolen work that all came together to create that image, right? And you just can't use that. Or I saw article a couple of weeks ago where there was an athlete in Texas that got suspended from school, and I think the football team, because he used AI to write his final paper. Right? Like, people are gonna do that, and now they've got AI that tracks the use of AI, and it can tell you that that piece was written at a 95% chance it was an AI device that wrote that, and it wasn't a human that wrote it. And so it's getting really kinda, and without any kind of discipline around it, it's gonna get out of control. And, I don't know, I like the idea that this stuff came out of my head. Sure, was it an amalgam of other things? Yeah, I was inspired by Tolkien when I was younger. I was inspired by my D&D play and all my friends. But
20
the stories are
years.
unique. Yeah. Yeah, my stories are unique. I mean, it came from me. It wouldn't have been here except for me. And if someone were to go out and use some of my story and throw it into someone else's story because they scraped it away with some AI, what? I'm not sure that's necessarily art. I think that's I don't know. It's not plagiarism, but I don't know what it is. I
Well,
don't know
it's
if
not.
the terms have been defined for it yet.
Well, you bring up a great point. It's not really original work because all the AI is doing is taking works from other places because it has access to all different data sources and then is piecing them together. Kind of what a television does. A television takes different particles and pieces and lays them all together and creates a colored panel that shows you that image. In many ways, it's kind of emulating the same idea and the same practice. So it's not creating something new, it's just taking something that already exists. So, yeah,
Yeah,
I don't
it's a little
know.
funky, especially for someone like me who depends on selling stuff that's unique, where someone could write
Right.
a fantasy novel in 5 minutes by talking to ChatGPT or Jasper or somebody, and just saying, "Hey, do this for me," and then putting their cover on it that could also be AI art and sending it out through Amazon, and now they're competing against me. I mean, there was no effort that went into that. Like,
Well, is
where's
there
the
any
art there?
well, is there anybody that is making any series or any books or anything that's similar to yours that you're
Well,
aware of
sure,
or
like,
no?
well, the the answer at the high level is no, but there's a whole genre of people that are writing similar to me. They're writing in, either epic fantasy or high fantasy or sword and sorcery or dark fantasy or young adult fantasy or any of the fantasies that are out there that are they're part of that spectrum, right? And we all know that when you buy this book or you walk into this section of Barnes and Noble and you pick up a book, you know what you're about to get immersed into. Same thing with sci-fi, right? You got true sci-fi, you've got sort of like the space opera stuff like Star Wars or Star Trek, you've got all that, the individual strata that's there. And so, yeah, I mean, on the lowest level, there are plenty of people that are writing things like that, but you would hope that some of my unique monsters aren't going to appear in someone's AI generated
Right.
work, you know, or at least they'd be smart enough to read through there and say, "Nah, that looks a little
Mm-mm.
on the nose. Can't use that one. Scratch it out."
Oh, but that is important though, being able to know that it's your work and nobody else makes anything like that because you wrote it. Uh, it's a really great attitude and a great way of going with it because, again, like there are so many other authors and writers that are creating the work in those genres.
Mhm.
And what you represent is yourself and like your experience and your creativity and your thought, not theirs.
Yeah, and you would hope that people like that kind of stuff, right? Not every author is going to be as successful as Terry Brooks or R.A. Salvatore
Or
or any of the
J.K.
other folks.
Rowling.
Yeah, J.K. Rowling. You're never, those are lottery tickets, but that's not why we do it, right? Like, some of us do it because, um, it's something that's in our head that we need to get out on paper. It's like, oh, I got this great idea, blah, here it is, and I'm going to type it in my keyboard, and I hope somebody likes it. But if I sell 50 of these books, I don't care. I just want to tell the story because it's a story that's in my head, and I think people will enjoy it, right? And then there are those that are out there that are written in a way where they might not ever succeed, right? Like, they may not have, like, I read a lot of books that are thrown out there, in particular by indie authors that kind of flood the Amazon marketplace. You start reading them, and you stop, and you're like, "Look, this needs to be edited, or someone needs to take a look at it. There's a big plot hole here," and things like that. Where what I've found is writing a book is actually a team sport. I've got a publisher, I've got a development editor, I have 2 copy editors, I have a beta readers that are part of that I bounce ideas off of as I go through it. I have an illustrator that puts together my covers. I have people that are out there that help me promote the thing. And so it's a team, it's literally a team sport. And you just can't do it successfully on your own. You have to be able to share your stuff with someone else to read it, and they're going to say, "Well, this is misspelled," or "I don't get this," or "There's a plot hole here," and you have to work with them to make sure that you're taking away all of that negative stuff that might be in there before you put a final product out. And a lot of people don't have the discipline to do that. I've seen novels go out the door that they're like, you should have shown that to somebody before it hit the go live button on Amazon or wherever it is. But look, I get it. J.K. Rowling has a team 10 times bigger than mine, right? And or some of these other folks do, and they share stories and they put stuff together, and like I said, it's kind of a team sport. And I don't mind that at all.
Well, that's why, like, I don't understand why everybody's been freaking out about the new HBO Harry Potter television series that they're doing. Just they're taking the books and they're turning them into a series. People are like freaking out, and I'm like, it's J.K. Rowling. I mean, I could imagine a skilled author like that has a proper team that she's working on this project. You know what I mean? It's like being able to respect an author and understanding if they're going to be making, like, they have a team and they're a respected author and they have work and they have an audience. Like, if they're going to do something, I feel like there needs to be like that level of respect and understanding of like, they know what they're doing. It's their work.
Yeah. Yeah, well, there's a few answers to that one, right? So you've got folks that are they believe in canon, right? I hear a lot of this in the Star Wars community or the Star Trek communities where it's like this has veered away from canon, and Catherine Kennedy has done something that she shouldn't do, and George Lucas would have never allowed this. There are those folks that are out there that just
I'm
believe that what they
tired.
saw first is the only thing that can be. But someone like JK, what is she supposed to do? Not write anymore? Like, she wrote her 7 books, and it's like she's done? Like, she's got a lot of let if she wants to write and go do prequels and origin stories and other things like that that'll build
Fantastic
and add
Beasts.
to the world, yeah, yeah, exactly, just go and do it. Like, that's because and you get that in a sense, like, because for the Harry Potter generation, where you can look at someone and you say Hufflepuff, and they answer you back by saying Slytherin, like that kind of stuff. You got that when you were young, and you as now that you're older, you want an older version of that. So the property of Harry Potter has gone from being a kid's novel to a young adult's novel to a new adult's novel to now an adult. Like, I still love Harry Potter. Bring more to me.
Well, we
Like, I
grew
want to
up
see it.
on we grew up on the books. The thing about me is I grew up on the books and the movies at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah, and
So,
so you can create that additional content, and there's nothing wrong with that, or there's there are people out there that don't want revisionist history. They love what they love, and I get that, but I agree with you. You can't punish the author for creating new content, even if it veers in some ways away from what you thought was the case. The only person really is going to know is the author who wrote it. It's in her
right,
head. Like,
right.
I know where this is going. You might not have seen it in the first 7 books. You might not have seen it in the first 7 movies, but this is where it was in the back of my head. I just didn't have time to put it in there because I was telling a story through Harry's eyes as an 11-year-old, as a 13-year-old, as a 17-year-old. And now that Harry's an adult, or other stuff has happened, let me explain what that gap is. And so it's like the gap between Star Wars 4, 5, and 6, and 7, 8, and 9. It's
Don't
like
give me
there's time.
don't get me started with the I'm so done with Star Wars. Like, it's X'd off. I don't talk
I'm
about it.
just using it as an example. I'm
I know,
sorry
I
I
know.
brought it
And
up.
no, it's okay. It's a little hard. It's a little hard to take in, but I mean, for your own for your own series though, because now it's a book, and you're going to continue writing for a, a long time. seeing people growing up with these books and eventually, I don't know, movies. Maybe there might be a TV series. Who knows? Maybe even a game. That'd actually be really cool if this turned into a video game.
You know, it
That would be
is.
so. Oh, no
Yeah.
way.
Yeah, so it launches the AR version of the game launches in 2024 and the VR version of the game launches in 2025, and it's also being converted into a graphic novel. So if you're a fan of
Ooh.
comic books and as an adult, like I was a nerd comic guy, of course, when I was growing up, I was a big comic guy, but now with the graphic novels that can go a little deeper, taking what I've written and turning it into a different medium that you'll find in a video game or you'll find in a graphic novel. No, I've not got anywhere near movies yet. I got to have a lot more sales, a lot more following before they'll they'll consider that. But the video game, I've been working on the storyboarding of it now for about 9 months. They came to me at the end of last year and were like, "Hey, would you like to see this converted?" And so I licensed my intellectual property over to them with the caveat that I would be able to at least be part of the creative team because there's things you can do in a game that I can never do as a writer, right? So it's just a different medium, and there are things that they need that aren't going to be in the book. So I'm there giving them back channeled information about
Well,
monetary systems and skill
right.
sets and what to expect. So at least it stays within the paths, within the fencing that I've set up in the four novels. They know that they're in there. But if they want to do something unique, they've got the creative license to do that, right? Because it's an RPG game, but it's a game that you're going to be able to create your own avatar in. You're going to earn your own, currency that you can then use to buy skill sets as your character gets trained. You can, become a knight or go on and get additional powers, and you find stuff. If you go in there and slay the dragon and you finish the quest, there's things you're going to do in the real world on the augmented reality side where you're going to be able to redeem stuff that you've won in the game in real life places. So you might get a buy one get one at Starbucks, or you might get a 50 cents off your next Subway sub, like that kind of stuff, depending on who's advertising in the game. So the game stuff is happening. It'll be out around this time next year,
Damn.
and fingers crossed that it goes smoothly. And then it'll be another year before the VR stuff comes out. But that's also in process. The graphic novel, literally it just started a month and a half ago, and it's in. They got the first six panels done, and that's
Colored or
about
black and
it.
white?
Yeah, what's that?
Colored or black and white?
Right now, everything I'm seeing is black and white, but they haven't. That's because we haven't
Ooh.
talked about it. So but it is pretty cool, so and for a comic guy like me, seeing it taken into that format and seeing
Mhm.
it drawn through someone else's eyes, you're like, oh, that's cool. I should have done that. Like
Mhm.
that, I inspired that vision in their head, and then they inspired me to write other things based on what they've drawn. And it's just like this cool sort of like creative collective that's going on, that's part of that, and they ask questions all the time about, we can't get your 3,000 words into our 6 pages, so tell us how do we get that to happen. And so it's a different medium. You have to learn and listen to people that know that medium better than you do. Like I know the authorship stuff. I don't know how to make this a graphic novel. I don't know how to make this a video game. And when they come in and they tell you, oh, this is what we're doing, this is what we're doing, what do you think? And you're like, I don't know what half of that means.
Yeah.
From a gamer perspective, yeah, all right, I'm a gamer, so I get some of the language, but at the end of the day, I'm not a tech guy, so I don't know. When I tell them, "Can you do this?" and they're like, "No, we can't make that happen with AR." You're like, "Oh, it would be great if we could," but you just don't know it, right? So you're learning on the fly, and it's been a
I
lot of
love
fun
that.
sitting on the sidelines watching these guys work, man. It's its own art form.
Yeah, and it's really amazing because that's the whole beauty about being an artist is the fact that when you collaborate with other types of artists and they show you what they can do to your work, it's just it's just another level because you're like, "Whoa, I never knew that you could do that with this. Okay, interesting, cool. I don't know how this works, but all right, let's make this happen."
It's so true, and it energizes you. Those two things I think are the things that get my juices flowing. Was when someone comes up to you. at a show and they tell you how much they like what you've written and they can't wait for the next. But then also working with others that have now enhanced your work. And you're like, I could have never done that on my own. And I didn't even think of that. And look at this now. And it's just so much better as a result of that. And then I'm inspired to use stuff that they've created back inside my own medium in the writing side. And it's just, man, it's so much fun. That's I think that's the best part of what I do is sharing and hearing what people like. Even if they don't like it, then I know not to do it next time. And they're not always right. There are things that I write that some people aren't going to like, but that's okay, because that's the way I write. Like I hear a lot of stuff. They throw out things like Stephen King's rule about using adverbs or not starting a book about in a dream sequence. Well, my main character has visions through dreams. So the
Right.
dream, it's like, and my book's doing just fine, right? So it's like it's okay. And like there are times when adverbs are just fine to use. I get the idea of using an adverb every sentence. I really do. But at the end of the day, not everything is a lazy dialogue tag. Sometimes it's
Well,
good.
yeah. I mean, I recently took my GED and I was like relearning about adverbs, and I was like, oh my god, I love this. I'm like, why don't we use adverbs more? Because they do. It's very expressive. Adverbs allow you to have a better understanding of settings, better text of the sentence, because you're adding more detail in. You don't just have an adjective, you don't have just a noun or pronoun, you have an adverb. It kind of helped that flow, and it's just it's too wordy. I hate that. It's like I hate when people use that term. It's too wordy. What does that mean? What does too wordy mean? Please tell me.
Yeah, did you understand what I was saying, and did you understand it better because I was too wordy? Not verbose. It's like, I get that sometimes people think that I write dense, and I do. Tolkien wrote dense. Martin writes dense. It's okay. Hawthorne wrote dense. Like there are people out there like pick up a Bram Stoker novel. He writes dense. He's giving you the description because he wants you to disappear into what he's telling you. He doesn't want you like some people just like to have just enough so they can picture it in their own head. Sometimes I want you as a dungeon master, I want you to know exactly what I'm saying because your character is going to have to react to my description. So I want you to know everything about that cave you just went into or everything you see in that monster's lair. And maybe that's a bad DM habit, as opposed to, it's a good storytelling thing, maybe not so much for books, but I'm pretty happy with the the success the books have found to date. So I'll take some constructive criticism here and then.
It's good to have a balance, and to have people give out their opinions. But the one thing that I have the most difficult time understanding is when someone doesn't understand the process and then they give you advice. It's like, do you understand what I'm trying to do? Do you really like understand my purpose over here?
Yeah. Yeah, you get that a lot where like, why isn't the next book out yet? Well, because it takes about 4 or 5 months to write, and then it goes through
Right.
another 4 or 5 months of editing, and that's why it's not out yet. But people don't see that, right? They think you just write it one day and it's done, and it's not. It goes
Yeah.
through beta reading, it goes through alpha reading, it goes through your publisher, your all of your editors, and groups out there that you're testing it against to make sure that it's tight, that it's going to make sense. And that's not always easy. And you have to forgive people that don't understand, um, what goes into writing a book.
Well, because people are so used to Hollywood. Like,
Yeah.
think about it. Every single movie about a writer, they own a Cadillac, they go to the Ritz Carlton, they sit upstairs, looking out at the Park Avenue. And they got a typewriter, and they're typing away, and there's some jazz music playing. No, bro, that's not how it is in real life.
No, it's not how it is
Hmm.
in real life. Yep, you got
uh,
people to answer.
exactly. Let me ask you something. I have the two books over here. I can't wait to get through these. Where can people find your content?
So I'm found pretty fairly ubiquitously.
Okay.
If you want to go to my publishers, go to dragonmoonpress.com.
Ooh.
If you shop for through Amazon or you're in a bookstore like Barnes and Nobles or Books a Million, you'll find my stuff there. If you prefer audiobooks, you can go to Audible or any of your wherever you digest your audiobook stuff. Or if you like ebooks, you can download my ebook from about 20 different distribution channels. You
Oof.
can also buy it off my website, jvhilliard.com, and go there too. So, um, but
Good
like I
read.
hate, no, yeah, find me wherever you can find me. I'm there.
Awesome. And I mean, best part, there is a VR and video game that's coming out. So that's super exciting. And
I'll
I'm
let you
sure.
know. I'll let you know.
Okay, perfect. So if you like what you like, be sure to like and subscribe. And if you want to check out more of Lost in the Groove, you can find us on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube at Lost in the Groove Pod. So with that, stay groovy, my friends. We'll catch you on the next episode. Bye, everybody.
Thank you very much.